have a dookie waiting for me today?
You know, I never really understood the 50-year-old narrative that anyone from the LGBTQ are groomers or anything like that. And most of all, I really never would have understood how lolicons would even be able to catch up on that, or even agree with that sort of narrative, but hey, I guess we're here. For those of you who don't know what lolicon means, well, loli is typically a young girl, and typically underage, and lolicon is basically referred to as someone who enjoys looking at young girls, sexually or not. Now, I know loli in itself just means young girl, or whatever, but by definition, lolicon is referring to men liking young women that are underage, which should be pretty wrong. And, well, you think that if it's wrong, it should be the end of discussion, right? Like, it should just be completely removed, there shouldn't be anything of it, and it should just not exist on the internet, or at least in the deep parts where no one's exposed to that. Well, since lolicon is, sort of favored in some weebs, you're gonna see a lot of people, especially on Twitter, arguing to defend that. And their defense is typically like, oh, well, maybe you should give the artist more credit and it's not real. Which, real or not, if you're looking at pictures like that, especially of young girls, it just raises some red flags for you. Even if you haven't done anything to an actual child, it still just makes me question what you're doing. But all those defenses have really never worked out, or just now failed to work. So they had to come up with a new narrative to not make themselves look bad. And who do they pick? The LGBTQ community, especially trans people, for some reason. And I don't know what happened. I guess they just randomly picked up on the right-wing narrative that all trans people are groomers and stuff like that, and they decided to do that to defend themselves, to not make themselves look like pedophiles and want to call any trans or gay people pedophiles. Now, although this sort of narrative is old but still sort of effective for right-wingers, that's how most of L0licers and lolicon artists have sort of used that narrative to defend lolicon or shotacon. Also, shotacon is just the same thing as lolicon but with boys instead. And of course, there's going to be some popular people that like Rev Desu trying to defend lolicon instead of knowing the actual dangers in sort of potential, like, just right out fuckery of lolicon, or even defending lolicon or shotacon by saying it's just, small petite people, but not actually children, even though most of them are. That's like saying, yeah, it's not really a cookie, but it has all the carbohydrates, the sugars, and the chocolate in it, But with how people defend this sort of thing and not make it seem pedophilic or transphobic is that they try to take the mentions of pedophilia out of it and push it onto trans people from the narrative that they were given by right-wingers. Well, although it is important to take credit for artists and appreciate art and stuff like that, but if it's something dangerous like zoophilia, pedophilia, even children doing anything suggestive or sexual, is absolutely not okay in any way, shape, or form. And ever since, like, their same excuses of, oh, it's not real, and oh, it's not hurting anyone, even though it pretty much does, and people do get groomed into believing that sort of stuff, they had to pick up a new narrative, and they obviously had to go with the transphobic narrative created by right-wingers to not make it seem like they're into kids and calling out trans people for being pedophiles. And then you have all these other people, especially those with influentiating in big audiences that defend this sort of thing, and then they use sort of like right-wing language and narratives like this that's going to be pushed onto them and going to make them transphobic. It's also kind of funny how, like, before then they were trying to make it seem like they supported trans people or trans rights, and now they're just going against the trans community. I really couldn't tell you how. And the fact that it's obviously hypocritical that you're calling out trans people as pedophiles for them being themselves and exploring their identity like me, but you go ahead and, do some shit like, and then you go ahead and start stroking your tiny little sausage to underage girls, or drawings of underage girls. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. They're not real. They're not getting hurt or anything. you're not grooming anyone. Yeah, definitely not. And I've been seeing this sort of thing uprising a little bit for people that like lolicon. And even though people know how disgusting lolicon is and how disgusting lollylikers are, this narrative is somehow able to frickin' work for them. And especially to other topics inside of the anime community. And you're probably wondering, well, if what they're doing is considered pedophilia or, having a certain liking to little kids, why wouldn't they defend trans people? Why wouldn't they be on their side? Well, it's because obviously, as I said, they want to push their sort of narrative to trans people because the right uses that. And so that, lollylikers can use that too to make it seem like they're not into kids and that they actually care about kids and worry about groomers and call innocent trans people groomers. And like I said, it's the same thing with my thesis about, transphobia with femboys. Go check that out. It's just like that where it's sort of becoming a rising thing, And I know someone like Vosh is a leftist, a radical leftist, I would say. And he's been exposed for looking at lolicon and horse porn. I don't know why. But some of the things that he says about trans people and stuff like that is right, though. Where he does support trans rights. Even though he has said some fucked up things, and I didn't really even like him before any of that. But he is sort of right about what he says about trans people in the US and other countries around the world, and he does support trans rights. I know I've gotten a little bit off topic here, but while I'm off topic, I do want to talk about how Rev kind of aimlessly defends lolicon. Because not only he said this about, making it seem like lolicon isn't about kids, but also him having to call out people like Vosh for looking at lolicon, but trying to defend it at the same time. I know most of you might not get that, but it doesn't really take a genius to figure it out that he's just trying to make himself look favorable and to make it seem like he's not actually into kids or the lolicon. I'm not saying that he is or he isn't, but it's just more of like, make up your fucking mind. Either you like lolicon or you don't. But yeah, that's all I really want to talk about, is make a sort of semi-ish quick video about the recent rise in transphobia amongst lollylikers. I know that sounds crazy enough to believe that they would call trans people pedophiles, even though they like looking at explicit images of little girls. And normally I don't really would like to talk about topics like this because of how controversial they can get and how if you don't agree with lollylikers, they like go after your throat. And also even talking about this just makes me fucking sick. But yeah, anyways, I'm done yapping. But one more thing I want to say, if you are a Rev Desu fan or Hero High or a general lolicon defender, I just want to say these simple words. Trans rights are human rights, and you really shouldn't be calling a 16-year-old a pedophile. That's all I gotta say. See ya.